really good to be here with everyone this morning, and is what I'm planning to do is to give you a quick update on the work that Ofsted is doing at the moment, and then talk more specifically about our work around careers education. So hopefully you can see the first slide. Can someone just let me know that that's coming through? Excellent, thank you, Siobhan. So first of all, to talk to you about the kind of work we're doing this term in Ofsted, and maybe some of your schools have been visited by us during the term. So we're returning in a phased way to our inspection work, and we're continuing to give schools the space to focus on the recovery. So we're working with schools that are inadequate or requires improvement or have gone a long time since their last inspection at the moment. And graded inspections are only taking place if there's a significant decline in a school or where a school has made a significant improvement and we're able to recognise that during this time. Full routine inspections will return later in the year. So what are we doing at the moment? We're carrying out monitoring inspections of inadequate schools. We're carrying out monitoring inspections of schools that were judged to require improvement. And we're carrying out Section 8 inspections of schools which were formerly good, where they've gone over 5 years, including the pandemic, since the last inspection, because there's a statutory timescale around that. We're also carrying out what we call inspections under no formal designation. So if we have a safeguarding concern about a school or about a breakdown in leadership and management, we're able to use Her Majesty's Chief Inspector's powers to inspect those schools if we have a concern about the safety of the children. And finally, the final type of inspection we're doing at the moment are inspections on request. And that's for outstanding schools, maybe where they have new leadership and they'd quite like an inspection to see if the school is still outstanding or whether it has declined and they want a new starting point for the school. So how are we selecting the providers? So we're selecting schools which were judged to require improvement at their last two inspections, mainly, but some schools where they've required improvement just once and we were able to go and offer a monitoring visit. And we're also going to those schools which are inadequate, because we're really aware that there's some schools that were graded inadequate 2 or 3 years ago before the pandemic and have made really rapid improvement. And it's of no benefit to anyone for the school to be sitting on that grade. So where we're able to go, carry out a monitoring visit, and if there's enough evidence, deem the inspection and make some new grades to show how the school's improved, which is of benefit to the school and the community. And in some of those schools, it's helping where maybe there's been a fall in roll or so on because parents have thought the school is inadequate. And so to really recognise those improvements that have been going on. And the only good schools we're going to at the moment really are those where it has been 5 years since there's been a visit. So in terms of our inspections, we're following the Section 5, which is the standard inspection, and the Section 8 handbooks at the moment. And we look at the 4 areas there. We look at the quality of education, which is a limiting judgment. So the school can't be graded any higher than the quality of education judgment. But there are our transitional arrangements still in place around the quality of education. So when the education inspection framework was introduced in September 2019, we put in place transitional arrangements to allow schools to implement curriculum development, and they have been extended, those transitional arrangements, but also extended and the wording changed to take account of the COVID challenges that schools have been facing. There's also judgments around behaviour and attitudes and personal development, leadership and management, and if the school has a sixth form, there's a separate sixth form judgment. When we're looking at leadership and management, we're looking at that ambitious vision for the young people that attend the schools. In terms of how we're working safely at the moment, so whenever we're visiting schools, we're having an initial telephone conversation with the school leaders to agree safe ways of working in schools during the pandemic. So we talk about the relevant COVID-19 restrictions, how inspectors can work effectively within the protective measures within the schools, including bubbles, agreeing the best way to gather the type of evidence that we need, and also having a conversation with leaders about the impact on the pandemic on schools and how that may have slowed any progress the schools making in the developments they've been trying to implement. And also after every inspection, we have the process that we follow, which allows schools to comment on the reports we're writing, raise any concerns before we publish, and to help us quality assure our work. Now, we are looking towards returning to more normal inspection, and we actually updated our handbooks for September. They were published on Tuesday, I believe, after I submitted this presentation. So as I go into the next part to talk about careers, any references to the handbook are to the current handbooks, which are in place at the moment. But at the very end, I'll talk about some changes which are coming in September, which are relevant to this audience. And as said, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And if I can't answer them in the time I've got allotted here, I will definitely come back to you. I can come back to you today with the answers if the questions get sent back through to me. So to talk more generally about careers education and where it fits into the framework. So we're really clear at Ofsted that we need to take a rounded view of the quality of education, and the curriculum is at the core. And we recognise the close connection between curricular content and the way the content is taught and assessed in order to support pupils to build their knowledge and apply their knowledge and skills. And that aspect is really important. So as I've said, the quality of education judgment is a limiting judgment. So if the quality of education is good, the school can't be any higher than good. It can't be outstanding, for example. Safeguarding is also a limiting judgment. So if safeguarding is not effective, then the school is likely to be inadequate. However, we remain really interested in children's and learners' wider personal development, including their behaviour and attitudes and that they bring to the classroom. And leadership and management remains a key area for consideration before we judge the overall effectiveness. So where does careers education fit in? Well, the first place you'll find it in our framework is in the personal development judgment. And the school inspection handbook makes clear that inspectors will consider a range of evidence to evaluate how effectively schools support pupils to develop in many diverse aspects of life. The handbook explains that the judgment focuses on dimensions of personal development that are most significant. And the 3 bullet points that fit here with careers education are about unbiased careers advice, experience of work, and contact with employers. And it's about supporting pupils to be ready for the next phase of their education. So the contact with employers bullet gives more details, and it explains that this is to encourage pupils to aspire, make good choices, and understand what they need to do to reach and succeed in the careers to which they aspire. The supporting readiness statement is about ensuring that pupils are equipped to make the transition to their informed choice of education, employment, or training successfully. And in paragraph 256 of the current handbook, it gives details of the sources of evidence that inspectors will consider to evaluate personal development. And this includes the quality of careers education, advice and guidance, and how well it benefits pupils in choosing and deciding on their next steps. So let's look at a definition of good when it comes to careers. So this is part of the personal development definition of good. And it says secondary schools prepare pupils for future success in education, employment, or training. They use the Gatsby benchmarks, a framework that defines the best careers provision in school and colleges, to develop and improve the careers provision and enable a range of education and training providers to speak to pupils in years 8 to 13. All pupils receive unbiased information about potential next steps and high quality careers guidance. The school provides good quality, meaningful opportunities for pupils to encounter the world of work. So that bullet is one of 9 which we consider to make a judgment of good for personal development. And that judgment's best fit If schools are not using the Gatsby benchmarks or providing unbiased information, that won't necessarily mean the inadequate judgment will be made, as not preparing pupils for education, employment and training is not one of the bullets in the inadequate grade descriptors for personal development. However, it is with other factors an area of weakness, which is unlikely that the school will be judged for good for personal development. The other place that careers education is mentioned is in our definition of sixth form provision, where in paragraph 330, we talk about the effectiveness of high quality impartial careers guidance. And in paragraph 331, we talk about how sixth form students their conduct and attitudes, including non-qualification or enrichment activities, prepare them for employment or progress towards further study. Now, in the sixth form provision grading, the good grade, here is what it says that relates to careers education. So leaders adopt or construct study programs that are ambitious, appropriately relevant to local and regional employment and training priorities, and designed to give sixth form students, particularly those with high needs and the most disadvantaged, the knowledge and skills they need to succeed in life. It also talks about the curriculum being coherently planned and sequenced towards those future learning and employment skills that are going to be needed, and about the sixth form preparing students for future success in education, employment and training. Now, unlike the personal development grade, sorry if I just pop back, there is in the grade 4, the inadequate descriptor, there is a line that says, if the school does not ensure that sixth form students get access to unbiased information about potential next steps, high quality careers guidance or opportunities for encounters with the world of work, then sixth form provision would be graded inadequate because only one of those inadequate bullet points need to fit. So just to skip forward and talk about the handbook, which has been updated for September 2021, there is nothing new in the handbook and there is absolutely no new requirements on schools around careers. However, we've put in 4 new paragraphs in the new handbook, which will be paragraphs 256 to 259, which just lay out in much greater clarity the way we look at careers education and making much more overt reference to the Baker Clause and schools' responsibility around that, and also talking about what would be likely to happen if the Baker Clause wasn't being met, but the inspectors would be required from September to mention that in inspection reports. So I'm aware I've run out of time. Hopefully that's been useful. I haven't been able to see the chat, so I don't know if there are any questions, but if there are, or if you think of any, please put them in the chat and I'm sure they'll get forwarded to me and I will return some answers as soon as I can. Thank you very much for listening and thank you for the work you've been doing in schools and on behalf of schools in your other roles.
Well, what an interesting morning with some really great and pertinent sessions. I hope you've all got lots to take back into your professional practice. I'm sure you have. I've seen lots of people scribbling notes down and listening to speakers. So as Siobhan says, I'm Clare Hutchinson and I'm Director of Network at the Careers and Enterprise Company, which means that I oversee our network and careers hubs. Hopefully you're all aware of us and that we're funded by the Department of Education with a remit to improve careers education across England, which we do by providing support, tools, resources, training and funding. And locally we work with strategic partners to ensure that our work is rooted in local economic need and aligns with other provisions, so obviously in Solent Local Enterprise Partnership. But I'd like to start by recognising the huge achievement for everyone in what's been a really challenging year, well, year and a half, isn't it really? I think keeping careers on the agenda when you're dealing in schools with lost learning, bubbles, twice a week lateral flow testing, staff and student absences, mental health challenges, remote learning, school closures, changes to exams, and well, just about everything else that's been thrown at you is no mean feat, and I admire your tenacity. And for businesses to continue to say that engaging with schools and colleges is a priority, despite their own challenges, is actually quite humbling. At CEC, our mission is to ensure that every young person achieves their next best step, whatever that may be. And we don't think that it's for us to decide what that is. And to do that, there needs to be a universal offer available to every school and college and every young person that's got targeted and differentiation for different cohorts. Careers and, well, employers engaging in education isn't new. You know, we don't claim to have invented it, but what we have brought about is some structure, some funding, and more some consistency. And in my role, I see ourselves as being in the foothills of progress and change, but willingness to collaborate and to learn from best practice like today, to question what's working, to constantly monitor, to review and adapt careers provision is what's going to make the biggest shift from just doing careers work because it's the right thing to do, to a really progressive careers experience for every learner from year 7 up to year 13. And today's been such a fantastic curation of sessions and speakers that collectively helped make this shift. You know, the content couldn't have been more well aligned to our strategy over the coming year than if I'd actually planned it myself. And you'll see what I mean when I take you through our plans for next year. So what's coming? Well, our strategic direction does remain the same. The government's Skills for Job White Paper set our direction of travel very clearly to scale up hubs until we've got full coverage across England by 2024. So from September, we'll go from 45% of schools and colleges in England involved to 65%. We have several teams within our company that provide support. So from our education team, as soon as the statutory guidance is updated, we'll share a brief on what that means to you and how we can support you. We're working really closely with government on adherence to the Baker Clause. Impartiality is critical, and young people deserve to be made aware of all the options that are available to them. But we just want to make sure that the process that sits around this is suitable and appropriate. So we're working really closely with government on what that actually means. I'm hoping that many of you have been involved in our careers leader training, which is all part of our drive to raise the profile of and professionalise the careers leader role. And that will continue through training, which has been, or it's in the process of being updated at the moment, and differentiated too. So acknowledging that different settings require different types of training. So you'll find that there'll be a bit more differentiation in there. We're also going to have a focus on engaging head teachers and governors in careers. I know that some of you already are very fortunate to have that sort of support within your schools, but we know it's not universal. So there are going to be briefings, resources, communications to support this work, so just so that we can ensure that careers just have that elevated status in schools. Now, from my team, what we're thinking about is what we're calling input to impact. And by this, we simply mean that we've spent really the last 5 years building the system and upskilling and socialising the gaps for benchmarks, which actually, as you all know, are the inputs. And what we need to do now is to be able to identify the impact from that aligned with specific inputs. We'll have some new projects coming starting in September, which are called Hub Incubation Projects, which play into our company's ethos of test, learn and adapt. And what we want to be able to do is to build the evidence base about what works. So each project that we fund is taking a hypothesis of what they think might work, and then it's being tested over the course of an academic year with some really detailed tracking of the young people involved. And over time, what we hope to see is that all careers activity is planned, designed, monitored and evaluated in this way. Because you never know, maybe what we'll find about it's not always about doing more, but doing things better or doing things in a more targeted way. Now, to underpin all this, we're going to be going a lot deeper on our data analysis. But to do that, we need your help, really. We'd like to see much deeper Compass Plus usage so that we can really analyse the data and then respond accordingly. This should be a really rich data source that would give us the most comprehensive snapshot of careers nationwide. I think there's kind of a misnomer that the Gatsby benchmarks does that, but the benchmarks are an input, a framework for you to use to really guide the way that you put your careers programme together. And they do only give us a very small part of the picture. So my plea today is to urge you to fully utilise Compass Plus so that we can then undertake a much more in-depth analysis of what's been doing where and by whom, which pupils are engaging in what kind of activity, what targeted cohorts that are involved, and then pulling some other external data sources in. And that means that we would then be able to provide the findings with schools and colleges, providers and employers, which hopefully would benefit everybody in their planning. Now, enterprise advisors come into my remit as well, and I have to say, I think they're sometimes a little bit underutilised. You know, this army of over 4,000 senior level professional volunteers. So what we're going to be doing is upskilling them a little bit more, just to ensure that they're really equipped to provide the most relevant support to schools and colleges. And you had a focus on Benchmark 1 today, and that's where we'll be starting too, because they're very well placed to play a really key role in strategic planning, given that many of them do that day to day in their business practice. And then we're also going to have a renewed focus on technical and vocational education apprenticeships, really to ensure that there's parity in between this route and higher education. And when I say parity, I'm kind of talking about the amount of time given to it. There's a huge amount of investment and time in making higher education understandable to young people, but perhaps a little bit less focus on technical vocational education. So we're going to ensure that we try and level that playing field a little bit more. And then our business partnerships team have developed a really targeted approach to working with cornerstone employers, which they'll be sharing very shortly. But again, it's much more about impact and how work is targeted appropriately. And then finally, in terms of best practice sharing, we're going to be doing some peer-to-peer review work of hubs. As I said, we've got them all over the country, and another 6 new hubs starting up in September. So it's a really great opportunity for hubs to take a look at each other, looking at hubs in similar contexts to one another, and just finding out what's working. So I'd just like to finish by, again, thanking you all for working with us through the Solent Hub, and for your continued engagement and enthusiasm in ensuring that we ensure that every young person receives the support and motivation to take their next best step in life. Thank you very much.